Great. I guess I can go ahead and get started here then. As people are quickly trickling in here, we want to thank you all for being here today. My name is Maria Bertram, and I'm the Vice President of Women in Mining Arizona chapter. I'm also a recruiter at Freeport-McMoRan. We are hosting these lunch and learn sessions monthly, and we have different topics come up every month. This month, we're really excited to be inviting Arizona Game and Fish to come talk about the Bighorn sheep reintroduction program that they have going on over at the Morenci Mine. And so we can't wait to share the work that they're doing over in Eastern Arizona. If you want to go to the next slide. Just to give you all a bit of background on Women in Mining Arizona, we're a chapter here. We're in our second year of existence, but we have a pretty strong membership base. Our main things that we focus on are educating, which is definitely where this lunch and learn session falls into, which is educating people about mining and regulation and other topics related to mining. We also really want to provide networking opportunities for people in the mining industry. The goal of attracting, promoting, and retaining women in the mining industry are some things that we hold really closely to us. And then also we are working on encouraging the next generation of women in mining to come up. So we also do a lot of mentorship work as well. So if you're interested in joining Women in Mining, we'd love to have you. We host events like this, and we also host events that are less technical and more focused on career development and networking opportunities. So the entire industry is open to joining us on things like that. Right now, everything's been virtual, but that's actually really worked well for us since so much of mining is remote anyways. So we'd love to have you guys, and feel free to reach out to any of us if you have any questions. So this Lunch and Learn, we are so grateful for our sponsors. Our platinum sponsor for Women in Mining this year is Freeport-McMoRan. We also have our payload sponsor for this event, which is SWCA Environmental Consultants. And then we also have our prospector sponsor for this event as well, which is Montgomery & Associates Water Resource Consultants. So we just want to say a huge thank you to all the support that we get from industry, especially from SWCA, from Freeport, and from Montgomery. And if your company is interested in sponsoring any of our events in the future, just let us know. We'd love to get you on board for those. And so next we have Andrew Harley here to tell us a little bit about SWCA.
Right, thanks Maria. SWCA actually has a long affiliation with Arizona. You see we have a Flagstaff office, and that the company actually began in Arizona 40 years ago. And we've been serving the mining industry ever since then. Our work has evolved from cultural resource work, which was the work that we kind of began the company with, and we've evolved into a natural resource or supporting natural resources, water resources, closure and reclamation. We are experienced in both the third-party NEPA work and the first-party baseline and permitting work. As such, we begin with the end in mind. We support mining companies in strategically planning the permitting and regulatory process throughout development, mine planning, mine life, and closure. Currently, SWCA soil scientists, geochemists, and ecologists are rethinking the closure and reclamation process right now, and we're starting to look for opportunities that can reduce these costs. Working to turn liabilities into assets while supporting local communities to maintain post-resource economies. As well as being employee-owned, SWCA is recognised as a top firm for gender diversity within the board, executive leadership, and across the company as a whole. SWCA is proud to support this Lunch and Learn, and I hope you enjoy the presentation.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. I hope everyone's day is going off to a great start. I'm going to introduce our speaker for today. Rick Langley is currently the Terrestrial Wildlife Program Manager for the Pinetop region with the Arizona Game and Fish Department. He oversees the non-game and game management and landowner relations program in the region. Rick graduated in 1991 with a BS in wildlife biology from Colorado State University. After working for a year with Wyoming Game and Fish Department, he began his career with the Arizona Game and Fish in 1993 as wildlife manager, game ranger. He spent 12 years in the position before taking the game specialist position in the Pinetop region. And after 15 years in that position, he recently was promoted to program manager. Today, Rick will discuss the history of bighorn in the mine, the challenges of having bighorn in an active mine, the cooperative work between the Morenci Mine and the Arizona Game and Fish Department, and how they have achieved success by capturing and reintroducing bighorn sheep into previously occupied habitat while trying to reduce vehicle wildlife collisions and conflicts in and around the mine. Without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Rick to present. Thank you.
Okay, picture's good or not there. Appreciate the introduction. I appreciate the opportunity to present in this manner. It sounds like we've got a wide range of folks all across the US on this, so I will try not to speak just to Arizona folks, as that's where most of this work has been done over the years. And whereas I seem to have no problem standing up in front of a group and presenting, I'm still feel a little challenged on all of the technological aspects of working through our processes with, sorry, I'm trying to get back to the beginning here. And now I cannot figure out how to change my slide or change to share my screen. Okay, there we go. So just so bear with me a little bit. I'm hoping this all works and comes together. Should be about 20, 25 minutes, and then have ability to take any questions and things like that. And then I'll also share my email address with you, and I can of course give out a phone number as well. But if you have further questions after we're done. So I'm going to try to share screen and oops, let's see. And see if this comes up. So do you still see me? Pardon? Okay, you've got a presentation in front of you, or a title slide then. Okay, fabulous, thank you. So yeah, as we talked about already in the introduction, this is about our population of Rocky Mountain bighorn sheep on the Morenci Mine. And of course, this project initially started with Phelps Dodge when they owned the mine, and then we've transitioned when the ownership changed over to Freeport-McMoran. And of course, you know, it's been an incredible cooperative effort between the two of us, and I don't know, it's almost, to me, it's almost unprecedented, the level of cooperation and work that we've been able to do on this project. So I'll quickly jump into that. So our cooperative efforts on managing bighorn sheep on the mine began in about 2005 when the department and Phelps Dodge, who of course later changed to Freeport-McMoran, began capturing and translocating Rocky Mountain bighorn sheep from the Morenci Mine in southeastern Arizona to unoccupied bighorn habitat in other parts of Arizona. Since 2005, approximately 224 sheep have been captured from the mine and the adjacent sheep habitat around it and released to other parts of Arizona that were previously occupied, historically occupied sheep habitat, but were currently vacant. There were no longer bighorn sheep in those habitats. So additionally, approximately 15 bighorn were captured and collared on the mine. And this was in about 2009 or so to analyze their movements, migrations, and their interchange with other bighorn populations. And as a result of this work, we basically had 3 new populations of bighorn sheep that have been established in previously unoccupied historic habitat. So I went too far. Oops. Sorry. And as I'll talk about a little bit more here, one of the other results is that bighorn versus vehicle collisions have decreased in the mine, and which has increased safety in and around the mine. So just a little perspective here, where Morenci Mine is located is in southeastern Arizona. It's just inside the border of New Mexico, and it's one of several copper mines down in that area. And if I remember correctly, it is the largest open pit mine in the U.S. at this time. So one of the big problems that I already alluded to were sheep being hit on roadways. We have a major highway that goes through the mine, and of course it accommodates a lot of mine traffic as well as visitors and people traveling through the area. And that's Highway 191. It used to be numbered Highway 666, but I guess at some point in time, someone came to their better senses and decided that was not a good number for a highway. So the sheep have become very habituated to human activity, which seems to be a pretty common in mines, across North America. It seems like you have these situations come up. But obviously we've put up road crossing signs. We've tried several things to try to reduce sheep from being hit, but these sheep are just very habituated to human activity. So illustrating that was since about 1998, we had a new wildlife manager that moved into that district, and he started tracking all of the collisions and all of the locations. And since 1998, we've had about 250 bighorn sheep that have been killed in vehicle collisions in and around the mine. Most of those accidents happen on Highway 191, which passes through the mine in Clifton and Morenci. It doesn't tend to be mine traffic like you expect the big haul trucks to be smashing sheep, into little greasy spots on the roads, but it's not. It's just regular traffic passing through that area. And of course, some of it is mine-related traffic that have been involved in these collisions. We haven't had any fatalities out of those 250 collisions. I don't even know that I've never even heard of any serious injuries, but obviously there's room for that. There's the opportunity for there to be serious injuries or death caused by accidents with wildlife. So that's less than ideal to us. That's less than ideal to the mine. You don't want that on, you don't want that on your conscience, on your plate. And it seemed like the responsible thing to do, as well as it's definitely a waste of an important resource like bighorn sheep, than just having them smashed on the roads in places. So a little history on bighorn sheep in that area. Historically, there were bighorn sheep through that country. There's a large canyon. The San Francisco River comes out of New Mexico. The Gila River comes out of New Mexico, and they join together on the south side of the Morenci Mine. And there were always, historically, there were quite a few sheep. Some of the trapper accounts going through that country, recalled, hundreds of sheep occupying the cliffs along the Gila River and the San Francisco River. So the state of New Mexico released bighorn sheep on the San Francisco River in the early 1980s, and they naturally kind of migrated on their own. They started showing up in other places, and one of the places that they started showing up was on the mine in the early 1980s. And despite all of the traffic, construction, disturbance, chemicals, et cetera, they decided to take up residence there. So looking at the highway collision issues mainly, we started, we quickly determined, we needed to identify some solutions to this. And we, of course, started discussing things with the mine, with Arizona Department of Transportation, and trying to come up with some solutions. And of course, people like, okay, let's fence them out. Well, you got to build a pretty big fence. Of course, that comes with a lot of baggage. You've got to have maintenance. It's expensive. You've got to have an 8x chain link and keep from jumping. Then, of course, we just crossings. They're very popular and very successful in a lot of areas. But one of the big problems and hurdles we run into footprint of the mine environment and the infrastructure. Those roads can be moved at any time as the needs of the mine changed and evolved in areas that they were using. So fencing would have been expensive, and it would have been constantly have to be maintained and redone. Highway crossings would have been tough to build, like an overpass or an underpass in an area where that wasn't going to be changed down the road. And we've seen it. I mean, in my tenure here, in about 15 years, I've seen, I think, 4 or 5 different revisions of that highway footprint going through there. And they're expensive. They cost millions of dollars to build those. So we initially started with removal. That seemed to be the most cost-effective and common sense way to attack this. So we did come up, we talked about a lot. We came up and cooperated on kind of a two-pronged plan to start capturing bighorn from the mine, within the mine, and from the surrounding bighorn habitat. Of course, even if you pull all the sheep out of the mine, which you're really not able to do, it's a permeable it's a permeable area. There's no solid barriers to keep other sheep from coming back in there. So we figured, well, if we pull as many sheep out of there as we can and capture from around the outside of the mine, it might help keep some of those sheep from recolonizing or just creating a vacuum and sucking sheep back into the mine. That plan later evolved into 3 different approaches for capturing. And it's been a great opportunity for me over this time frame, because I've gotten to do a lot of training and kind of innovation and trying to capture sheep in many different ways. And it's been a challenge, and it's been a lot of fun. So of course, as we start talking about removing sheep from this mine, there is one huge challenge, and that is safety of the participants, and of course the sheep in a dynamic and working mine environment. Now, this mine has been very active during this whole time. There are areas that are less active than others, and as you can see in that picture, that's an area. There's some roads down below it, obviously some pipelines, but we're to and adjacent to active mining in a lot of this. So continuing on that challenge, we had to look at mine hazard training. We had to look at proper PPE. Most of these pictures in here, and so for those of you, PPE is personal protective equipment. If you look in this picture here, we've got safety vests on, we've got hard hats on, leather gloves. We're supposed to be wearing eyewear. Of course, this guy wanted this picture without his glasses on. But this was a huge priority for us in order for us to be able to work on the mine, was making sure that we met all of these conditions that the mine set out for us. So tying into that environment was a huge thing. Sometimes these sheep are occupying the mine during the middle of summer, and it's not uncommon to be dealing with 110-degree temperatures in there. So we're having to combat that. I'm trying to plan capture events for times when it wasn't so hot. You could see in that last picture, vegetation and terrain, everything down there pokes and sticks you. There's cactus, there's cat claw, mesquite, different types of yucca, and then the terrain itself, just the type of habitat that sheep inhabit. They like these loose, rocky, steep slopes that make it a challenge when you're trying to capture stuff in that area. So Likewise, we had highway and mine traffic. We couldn't disrupt mine operations when we were doing this stuff. We did get a few accommodations here and there, but for the most part, we tried to operate where we would not disrupt any mine operations. Highway traffic, as you saw, like in that first introductory slide, there was a sheep standing right in the middle of the highway. It's not uncommon for us to be trying to capture sheep right alongside this highway. And we've got to be very cognizant of, traffic around us, our safety as well as safety for the sheep. When we went into drop net sites, we had to work with the mine, laying out where we were going to set up a net and having that blue staked. The mine set up a water supply line for us to a trough to help attract the sheep to the area. And then likewise, we wanted to use volunteers, and at some level, just because some of these operations can be very manpower intensive, and we got it set up to where Freeport-McMoRan was allowing folks to take MSHA training and then be able to participate with us under some pretty strict guidelines, of course, to help with these capture events. The mine also helped us by providing vans for transport of personnel to different locations. They give us security escorts around the mine. They'll unlock locked gates. They allowed us to build a big capture pen that has been not used much, but we have caught sheep in it on 2 different occasions. I kind of forgot to address that in this presentation. But, and then they provided a lot of personnel to assist us on any of these capture events. So, you look back, this has been going on for 15 years. It has been just a wonderful thing that they've allowed. So going into some of these capture methods, and I'm not going to beat these up too much, outside of the mine and in some of the undeveloped non-active mining areas, we were able to do captures from a helicopter. And what that involves is and you can see in the picture with the helicopter in it, there's a guy in an orange jumpsuit kind of leaning out the side. He's got a net gun. They identify a herd of sheep. They identify what animals they want to capture out of that herd. And then the helicopter flies in low over the top of them and literally shoots a net out over the top of those sheep. And then you drop off what we call muggers. They come in and they bag up the sheep, like in that middle picture, and they blindfold them. They put them in a transport bag, and then the helicopter comes back in and hooks up a sling line to that sheep and then takes it back to a processing area. Some of the most exciting stuff you could ever imagine doing. It's highly dangerous, a lot of risk involved because you're in a helicopter at very low elevations, and chasing animals across very rugged and steep terrain. The other thing we started doing initially too was darting. We had kind of some experimental drugs at the time that they were trying to get certified for wildlife use in the US. They'd been used for decades in Africa. Since that time, and those are very potent drug, we changed from that to a drug that's much more safer, and it's a kind of a drug cocktail that we use, and we're able to use it on sheep, elk, deer, bears, mountain lions. It's a very safe drug, and we've had great results with it. You can see in the picture of it, the ram on the left with the little red arrow, that's pointing to a dart that is in the heavy shoulder muscle of that ram. And then, of course, once we get a hold of them, they go to sleep. We blindfold them, we put them on a stretcher, and then we're able to carry them out to where we need to go. Obviously, this guy in that picture doesn't have a hard hat on. We were not in an active mining area at that time. My little disclaimer. And then the drop nets. I couldn't find my really good pictures of the drop net, but brief description. We would bait these sheep into an area with alfalfa and usually a salt block. And then here's that water trough that we were able to have the mine run a water line to. And we were usually capturing them during the heat of the summer when they were most attracted to that water source and some green feed instead of, harsh baked desert vegetation. And we would wait until we'd get the right group of sheep that we would want under that net. And then you're able to remotely trigger that net and it drops over the top of the sheep. And then you get a whole crew of muggers running out there to get hands on the sheep. You blindfold them, you hobble them, and then you're able to process them and load them into a transport trailer. After you've ear tagged them and collared any of them that are going to get collars and things like that. So yeah, to go back, kind of summarizing our successes here. From 2005 to 2007, we captured and translocated 58 bighorn to West Clear Creek, which is south of Flagstaff and west of Camp Verde, Arizona. That population has thrived. It's been an outstanding success. And then from 2009 to 2000, so we backed off a little bit after that. We really didn't have any locations at the time we were sure we wanted to go into with new releases. So then from 2009 to 2011, we were looking more at analyzing the problem of where these sheep are moving, where they're getting struck on the mine or on the highway. It's not necessarily a mine problem, it's just a highway problem and where these sheep like to live. But trying to monitor their movements and their highway crossings to see if we could evolve into a proactive approach, or I guess it would be reactive, to create some highway crossing, whether it be an electric crosswalk or an overpass or an underpass, and maybe even utilize some of the existing highway structures to facilitate that. We get a lot of good data out of that. We did identify some areas that we could facilitate with some structures, but kind of got stalled. Right after this is kind of when copper prices crashed, and the mine had their hands tied more with daily operations and trying to do some enhancement work as far as trying to build an overpass or something like that. Arizona Department of Transportation hit a wall as well with funding. And then more recently, some of those problems have been fixed just by, they've done a recent, over about the last 2 years, a recent highway realignment, and they have fenced that whole new stretch with 8-foot high chain link fence. So that kind of went away. Some of the problems went away, or some of the opportunities went away with funding. So we started seeing vehicle collisions start to creep up again in number. So from 2004, we had a new area come open. It was previously there was previously a domestic sheep grazing allotment right up to this area, but it was historic sheep habitat. And that domestic sheep grazing allotment went away. And we were able to then move forward with some reintroductions of bighorn into this area, which is the Little Colorado River, which is just outside of Greer, Arizona. It's also on the eastern side of the state, not too far in from the New Mexico border. So, and it looks more like normal, what you would expect to see for Rocky Mountain bighorn sheep habitat, which is pine trees, elevations of 7,000 to 9,000 feet, things like that. And so we relocated 63 bighorn over those 3 years, and they've done very well in that area as well. So once we completed what we wanted to there in Greer and the Little Colorado River, we still were seeing a fair number of sheep being hit on the highways and the roads around Clifton and Morenci. So we looked at other opportunities. We've got some existing bighorn populations on this side of the state in the Blue River and along the Black River corridor. So for 2 years, we started pulling some of those sheep out of the mine and the towns, and we released another 46 sheep into these two populations as well. And then in 2018 and 2019, we moved forward into another new area, and that's East Clear Creek, which is south of Winslow, Arizona. It's kind of north of the Mogollon Rim as it runs across Arizona. And we started capturing both with the helicopter and with darting again at that time. And we did some drop dead captures for these captures as well over the last 2 years. We plan to capture again this year in November, well, just like last week, but of course, I'm so tired of saying because of COVID, but because of COVID, we were not able to pull off a capture. And as you can see, these captures involve a lot of people in close contact. And, even just wearing masks wouldn't have really fixed our issues and our ability to handle these situations. So we just decided not to do anything this year. There was nothing that was critical where we would need to do it. So kind of trying to move forward, get through this. But last week we also darted and collared an additional 5 ewes and 3 rams on the mine and in and around town. We're trying to use some of those sheep kind of as they call them Judas sheep, help us identify time for captures when sheep are in areas that are accessible to us, and also to monitor the movements of those sheep in response to this new highway alignment. We're going to continue to evaluate opportunities to capture and translocate bighorn sheep as those sheep are available in the mine. And we're going to continue to monitor our vehicle collision data and the movements of bighorn in and around that new highway. What did we learn from this effort? That industry and conservation agencies can work together for the common good. If you're familiar at all with a large mine like this, you're gonna what level of restrictions you would have to have on turning loose a bunch of rogue game and fish folk with dart guns and net guns and things like that in and around a working mine. But we accomplished it. I don't think we've ever had any conflicts or problems or any threats to kick us off because we weren't following the rules that the mine had outlined for us. So of course, communication and understanding each other's needs is another critical part to that. They did a great job of understanding how we could work, what we would do, what we needed to do to care for the sheep, to care for our own people, things like that. And then lastly, there are many ways to skin a cat or catch a sheep. We had to evolve constantly in our techniques and methodologies and our drug use, things like that, to make this good for the sheep, good for us, and good for the mine, and good for Arizona Game and Fish Department. So it's been a really rewarding experience. I mean, I feel like I can look back at my career when I decided to retire and go, yeah, I think I did some good things, restoring sheep to 3 different unoccupied, areas that historically had bighorn sheep. That to me is really rewarding. And of course, thank yous go to Freeport McMoran, obviously, and Phelps Dodge prior to that. I can't believe the working relationships that we've been able to maintain. They've been great. Obviously, Arizona Game and Fish Department, who I work for, and then the sportsmen and sportswomen of Arizona. All of this work has been primarily funded by license and tag fees. Arizona Game and Fish Department doesn't receive any tax revenues. We're primarily funded by license and tag sales, and through the federal Pittman Robertson funds, sports wow, now I'm drawing a blank. Anyway, where the Pittman-Robertsons come from, which is an excise tax on sporting goods that was voluntarily imposed. So, and I'm trying to just get through that kind of fast. And that should be it. I know I'm already a couple minutes past 12:30, but you can have me for as long as you want for questions. And let me try to get off of screen share.
This is great. Thank you so much for this presentation, Richard. We do actually have some questions that have come in that if you've got time to answer. The first that I'm quite interested in is, what is the actual process of, once they are netted, how do you get the blindfold and everything else on them?
Well, as we tend to say, it gets pretty Western at that point in time. It's literally, when these sheep are not darted and immobilized, it's literally a wrestling match, and you are trying to reach through this net, putting a blindfold on them, freeing up their legs. We have leather hobbles that we put on around their legs then to keep them from kicking, being able to run away, things like that. And it's the same way under the drop net. You turn loose a whole crowd of people to run out there into this mess of sheep jumping and hopping and all over the place and on top of you while you're trying to get them down on the ground and put a mask and at their face, basically, and then get them hobbled so that then you can start untangling them. I wish I had video of that, but it can be pretty challenging. It can be pretty abusive to the people involved, but obviously we try to handle these sheep as carefully as possible because they are a pretty precious resource.
Do you know the approximate population size around the mine of the bighorn sheep?
So where the mine lies within a couple of, several drainages and several areas of sheep habitat, like the San Francisco River, the Blue River, the Gila River, and the Gila Mountains to the west of the mine, and Eagle Creek, which is a really good population. If you totaled up all of that area, there's probably about 500 sheep in those populations right now.
That's much larger than I was anticipating.
Yeah, and of course we're constantly trying to figure out how much interchange. We know that the sheep on the mine are not just mine sheep. We know that they're traveling in and out of the mine and using those adjacent habitats. And that's kind of the purpose of this latest collaring effort as well, is to reevaluate that interchange with those other populations, because we don't want our removal of sheep from the mine to affect those native populations in a negative way.
How do you go about determining, you had talked about with the drop nets, trying to make sure you had a good combination of sheep before you drop the net? What is the ideal of trying to move a population? Are you looking for specific families, maybe just juveniles?
That is a challenge, because of course you've got to wait until they all decide to go under the net at the same time. And that one picture that I showed was kind of fuzzy, but you could see we actually did have good family group under the net, where we had ewes with their lambs. We didn't want to, and we were trying to get kind of family groups or groups that were at least associated with each other, so that when we release them in an unfamiliar area, hopefully they would want to stay together. Because when you're doing, say, the helicopter captures with the net gun, you might grab 2 sheep out of one group of 10, and then they get combined when they get released with other sheep from other groups and things like that. And they may not want to stick together. We've seen some times where they have just it was like letting cats out of the bag. They all go all over the place. So we were trying to keep them together in family groups as much as we can.
Got a couple more questions here. How quickly do the bighorn sheep reproduce?
So they typically, those females, the ewes will usually drop just one lamb every year once they're past that yearling. Once they're past that 1.5 year age, they'll reproduce usually a lamb every year. We think we've seen a few times where they've produced twins, but not a lot. But they have pretty good survival. We do think that's one of the reasons for the sheep occupying the
Rick, it looks like you froze up. Well, I guess. Oh, there we go. Looks like we're having a little bit of technical difficulties.
You're back.
There we go. Hi, Rick.
Hi.
Okay. Had a little technical difficulty there, but how about we go to what looks like one of the last few questions. And if any more questions do come in, we'll follow up with these individuals after the webinar is over with your contact information. So the next question is, what is the biggest challenge to reestablishing Bighorn in a new location that was historic habitat?
Hey, Rick, can you hear us?
I can hear you, Mario.
Okay, so let's give it another try. Another last question that we had was, how do you determine where they will be relocated? Is there an ecosystem analysis to make sure that where they are released, where they're not detrimental to the new environment system and wildlife area already existing there?
Yes, we do go through a pretty extensive habitat analysis, looking at all the proper components. Do we have escaped terrain? Do we have proper vegetative components to, for their health? Are they in life in the area? And that's both, and that also includes endangered and threatened or sensitive species. So, and then we are really keying on areas that were previously occupied. All of these areas, we have historic evidence of sheep being in that area until either the time that, European settlers moved into this area or soon after that, where that was kind of the demise of many of those sheep populations. And then as domestic sheep allotments were moved into some of these areas, I think most people are pretty aware of the problems with diseases that are debilitating to wild sheep populations that can be carried by domestic sheep. So we do, of course, look at that too, the proximity of domestic sheep grazing allotments to these areas, and we're not going to dump them right in on top of each other either.
Sure. Thank you. We have one more question. I think it was, what's the biggest challenge to reestablishing populations in a historic habitat?
I think the biggest challenge has been, we look at it from a human point of view, and we look at it and say, oh, that looks like the sheep should love that. And you put them in there, and we've had instances where the sheep leave. And trying to ensure that they stay in those areas is part of the problem. I think we've had really good luck with these releases. I think as we've evolved from just kind of hit and miss, grabbing a sheep here and a sheep there, to trying to release kind of these, I don't know, I don't want to say family groups, but because that's kind of anthropomorphic, but these sheep that already like to hang out together, if we can release them together, I think we have a better chance. And then we're letting the sheep determine that this is good habitat, and then we're trying to learn from what they decide they like, and trying to learn from that and analyze how they use those habitats and what about it is that they like from it. But trying to get them, make sure that they go there and stick there is the hardest, has been the hardest part.
All right. Well, thank you so much. I think that's all the questions we have right now. But we really appreciate you joining us and having a talk. I think we can jump into our next slide. Yeah, so I think that's all the time we have. Again, thank you for joining us and being here. Be sure to check out the other upcoming webinars that we have on December 2nd and January 19th, where we'll be sharing some other projects around, different projects around Arizona. But I think that's all we have for today. Again, thank you so much. And I think that with that, we will wrap it up.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Rick.